Imagine living in a society where the greatest monsters aren't lurking in the shadows but are right next door, hidden under the mask of normalcy. And what if I told you that, contrary to popular belief, danger rarely comes from outside but from where we least expect it? The shocking case of Becky not only challenges our deepest beliefs about safety and trust but also reveals a terrifying truth. Sometimes, the real evil is incredibly close, and understanding this could be the key to protecting those we love most. Come discover how this revelation could change your perspective and perhaps even save lives. The silence in Becky Watt's house that morning contrasted sharply with the chaos that was about to unfold. The teenager, known for her meticulous routine, was nowhere to be found. Her room was immaculately tidy, as if she had simply evaporated into thin air. Objects on her nightstand, a closed book and a phone with no notifications, told an incomplete story. Outside, the sun bathed the streets of Bristol, while inside, a storm of uncertainty was beginning to brew. Darren, her father, couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to be discovered. As the family began calling friends and relatives, the tension mounted. Angie, Becky's stepmother, tried to remain calm, but the inexplicable absence of the girl made her chest tighten with growing anxiety. Each unanswered call, each passing minute, was a drop in the bucket of fear. Becky wasn't the type of teenager to disappear without warning. She always informed someone of her whereabouts, and her absence was a disturbing anomaly. Angie's mind began to fill with dark images, possibilities she dared not speak aloud. By nightfall, the situation had gone from concerning to desperate. The police were called, and the first officers began asking questions. A detective's notebook was already filled with seemingly trivial details. Times, last conversations, daily routines. But nothing made sense. The family was trapped in an endless nightmare, where every second without news was torture. Becky's face, captured in photos scattered around the house, was a constant reminder of the void left by her absence. As the investigation progressed, the police expanded their reach. Close friends were questioned, security cameras were reviewed, but Becky seemed to have vanished without a trace. The once familiar streets of the city now felt like a labyrinth of mysteries. Darren, in desperation, made a public appeal through the media, his voice laden with pain and hope. He clung to the idea that his daughter was still alive, somewhere, waiting to be rescued. Time, however, was relentless. As hours turned into days, hope began to wane. The police, though diligent, could find no clues pointing to Becky's whereabouts. The family home became a gathering point for relatives and friends who came to offer support. But the air was heavy with the sense that something terrible had happened. Deep down, everyone knew that time was against them. Meanwhile, in the silence of a dark night, welcome to Spooky Stories. I'm Milo, your guide through the chilling and the unknown. Here, we dive into terrifying tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Join our community of thrill seekers, and let's explore the darkness together. If you're curious about how I keep my concentration, efficiency, performance, and mental health at their peak every day, I'm going to share with you 2 resources that I use daily in my video creation routine. First, breathing for sleep. This method is essential for my deep, restful nights, ensuring I wake up refreshed and ready to create high-quality content. And the best part? It's super easy to incorporate into your routine. And then there's the 7 seconds at-home ritual. This ritual is backed by 4 neuroscience studies and helps to supercharge my brain power, keeping my focus sharp throughout the entire day. Want to try these resources and feel the difference in your routine? The links are right here in the video description and pinned in the comments. Don't miss this chance to elevate your productivity and mental well-being. The morning after Becky's disappearance, the house was enveloped in a dense, suffocating atmosphere. The usual lively breakfast chatter was replaced by an oppressive silence. Darren and Angie moved through the house like ghosts, unable to find comfort anywhere. The walls, once filled with happy memories, now seemed to close in on them, as if trying to hide a terrible secret. Becky's absence hung over them like a shadow. As the police continued their investigation, more details began to emerge. Nathan, Becky's stepbrother, and his girlfriend, Shauna, were questioned. Their answers were evasive, full of uncomfortable gaps. They claimed to have seen Becky for the last time that fateful morning, but their stories were strangely aligned, as if rehearsed. Detectives began noticing small inconsistencies in their statements, details that didn't quite fit. Something felt wrong, but there was still no concrete evidence. Nathan's behavior started raising suspicions. He was restless, his usual nonchalance replaced by palpable tension. During interrogations, he avoided eye contact, and his responses seemed calculated. Shauna, on the other hand, was oddly unconcerned, almost indifferent. She laughed at inappropriate moments, as if immune to the gravity of the situation. The detectives, skilled at reading subtle signs, began to wonder if this behavior was a mask hiding something far more sinister. Meanwhile, days passed, and the search for Becky intensified. Helicopters flew over isolated areas, sniffer dogs were brought to parks and woods, and the local media made sure to keep the public informed of every new development. But for Darren and Angie, every news report that brought no new information was a devastating blow. The hope that had once kept them going was now giving way to despair. They wondered what more they could do, what stone had yet to be turned in the search for their daughter. Then, on a rainy afternoon, a lead appeared out of nowhere. Forensic experts, while examining Becky's house once more, found traces of blood on the doorframe of her bedroom. The stains were small, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but they were there, spread across 3 different heights. The discovery made Darren's heart stop for a moment. The blood was recent, fresh enough to indicate that something violent had happened there, but it gave no clues as to what or who might have caused it. The discovery of the blood marked a turning point in the investigation. The detectives knew they had to act quickly. They turned their attention to Nathan and Shauna, convinced that the answers were closer than ever. As the puzzle pieces began to fall into place, the net tightened around Nathan and Shauna. The tension between the two was palpable, especially when the detectives kept them separated during interrogations. Shauna, always the colder of the two, began showing signs of discomfort. Her once confident eyes now avoided direct contact. The detectives, seasoned in detecting weaknesses, seized on every hesitation, pressing her harder until something inside her began to crack. The turning point came when forensic results were revealed. The blood found on Becky's doorframe was hers, and mixed with the blood was a fingerprint from Nathan. The impact of this information was devastating. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Nathan fell silent for a long moment. His usually expressionless face now showed a mix of panic and resignation. He knew that the lies he had told were crumbling, and the truth could no longer be hidden. The detectives decided to play hardball. They revealed to Nathan that the receipt for the circular saw had been found, along with security camera footage showing him and Shauna buying the equipment. It was at this moment that Nathan finally broke. In a trembling voice, he began to confess, but his words were filled with justifications and half-truths. He tried to portray the situation as an accident, something that had spiraled out of control. But the detectives knew this was just another desperate attempt to minimize his actions. Nathan confessed that he had planned to scare Becky, but that something went terribly wrong. He described how, after a moment of panic, he strangled her to silence her. The words came out of his mouth with difficulty, as if each one was an unbearable weight on his conscience. He tried to blame fate, the circumstances, but deep down he knew there was no excuse for what he had done. The interrogation room was silent, except for the sound of his voice, broken by fear and guilt. Shauna, upon learning that Nathan had confessed, tried to maintain her facade of innocence. But the detectives already had what they needed. They confronted her with the new evidence. The text messages between her and Nathan, filled with disturbing fantasies about young girls, including Becky. Shauna's expression shifted from carefree to defiant. She denied everything, accusing Nathan of lying, trying to pin all the blame on him. But the detectives were not fooled. They knew she was deeply involved. Finally, Shauna gave in, but not without fighting until the end. In a chilling tone, she admitted that she knew what Nathan had done and had helped him cover up the crime. She recounted how she As the layers of deceit were peeled away, the full horror of Nathan and Shauna's actions came to light. With the confessions in hand and mounting evidence, the detectives were now ready to uncover the complete story. The next step was to search the shed where Shauna claimed Becky's remains were hidden. What they found was beyond anyone's worst nightmares. Amidst piles of boxes and plastic bags, the dismembered body parts of Becky Watts were discovered, carefully wrapped as if they were nothing more than disposable objects. The scene was grim and heavy, the silence punctuated only by the investigators' movements as they catalogued the macabre evidence. The metallic smell of blood mixed with the dampness in the air made the atmosphere almost unbearable. Each member of the forensic team felt the weight of the tragedy that had unfolded in that place. Becky, a young girl full of life, had been reduced to pieces, the victim of unimaginable cruelty. The work of the forensic team, usually methodical and precise, became an act of pure anguish as they carefully documented each piece of evidence, every trace of the horror inflicted upon her. Back in the interrogation room, Nathan and Shauna faced the consequences of their actions. With irrefutable evidence and their confessions recorded, the police now had the full picture of what had happened. Nathan, defeated and without any hope of redemption, remained silent, his eyes fixed on a distant point as if trying to escape the reality surrounding him. He knew that what he had done was unforgivable and that the life he once knew was irreversibly destroyed. Shauna, however, maintained a cold and calculating demeanor, even in the face of the murder and conspiracy charges. For her, it seemed the game was not yet over. Her mind was constantly at work, searching for a way to minimize her involvement, to deflect the punishment she knew was coming. But the detectives, now familiar with her manipulations, were ready to expose each of her lies. The coldness that had once protected Shauna now only deepened the abyss between her and any chance of clemency. The media, always hungry for sensational stories, followed every development of the case. The headlines were relentless, detailing the horrors uncovered and the downfall of the two accomplices. The city of Bristol, previously tranquil, was shaken to its core by these revelations. Families who had known Nathan and Shauna could hardly believe that these seemingly ordinary people were capable of such atrocities. Becky's tragedy became a symbol of the evil that can lurk behind the veneer of everyday life, plunging the entire city into grief and fear. However, for Darren and Angie, the weight of the truth was unbearable. The discovery of what had happened to Becky devastated them beyond words. There was no comfort, no way to process the magnitude of their loss. The home that once was As the investigation deepened, the detectives began to uncover the true motive behind Becky's brutal murder. The text messages exchanged between Nathan and Shauna revealed a disturbing obsession shared by the couple. These messages were filled with twisted sexual fantasies revolving around the desire to dominate and control vulnerable young girls. To Nathan, Becky was not just a stepsister. She was the perfect target to fulfill these depraved fantasies. Nathan had harbored a silent resentment toward Becky for years, a bitterness that eventually transformed into something far more sinister. He saw in her an opportunity to realize his desires for power and domination, desires that were closely tied to his sexual fantasies. Becky was young, vulnerable, and within his reach, an easy target for his dark intentions. What began as a plan to intimidate her and teach her a lesson quickly escalated into something far more dangerous and irreversible. Shauna was not a passive participant in this scheme. She actively encouraged Nathan's fantasies and took part in the planning. The messages exchanged between the couple made it clear that their objective was not merely to frighten Becky, but to use her to satisfy their perverse sexual desires. They discussed tying her up, gagging her, and keeping her captive to carry out their acts of sexual violence. On the morning of Becky's disappearance, Nathan set the plan in motion. He approached Becky's room armed with a mask, duct tape, handcuffs, and a stun gun, ready to turn their fantasies into reality. However, when Becky resisted, something he hadn't anticipated, the plan began to fall apart. In a moment of panic, fearing that Becky might escape or recognize him and report him, Nathan strangled her, ending her life in a desperate act of self-preservation. After the murder, the couple faced the grim reality of their actions. Shauna, showing a chilling lack of remorse, took charge of the situation. Together, they decided that the best way to cover up the crime was to dismember Becky's body, making it easier to dispose of the evidence. Using the circular saw they had purchased, which was initially intended to facilitate their macabre fantasies, they reduced Becky to pieces, wrapping her remains in plastic bags and hiding them in a shed not far from their home. The sexual nature of the crime could not be ignored. The text messages, combined with Nathan and Shauna's partial confessions, revealed that the motivation behind Becky's murder was not just a desire for control, but a twisted quest for sexual gratification. They viewed Becky not as a person with hopes and dreams, but as a mere object to With Nathan and Shauna's confessions and the overwhelming evidence in hand, the case of Becky Watts became a national sensation, shocking Britain to its core. The media, fascinated by the macabre combination of violence and perversion, brought every sordid detail of the crime to light, exposing the couple's motives and the brutality of their actions. Bristol, a city once known for its calm, became the epicenter of a horror story that seemed ripped from the pages of a nightmare. The local community, which had followed the search for Becky with hope, now faced the harsh reality of her tragic end. The trial of Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare was one of the most anticipated and publicized of its time. The courtroom was packed, with family members, friends, and journalists filling every available space. Darren and Angie, devastated by their loss, were there, seeking answers and perhaps some measure of justice that could ease, even slightly, the pain they felt. In court, prosecutors detailed how the couple had plotted Becky's abduction, driven by their twisted sexual fantasies, and how, after the murder, they dismembered her body to conceal the crime. The revelations during the trial were devastating. The text messages exchanged between Nathan and Shauna were read aloud, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind about how deeply disturbed the two were. The jury listened in horror as they learned about the couple's plans to subjugate Becky, about the sick pleasure they derived from discussing how they would control her. The coldness with which Shauna described the moments after Becky's death, helping Nathan dismember the body, was the final blow that solidified their guilt. After weeks of gut-wrenching testimony, the verdict was finally delivered. Nathan Matthews was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 33 years before he could seek parole. Shauna Hoare, whose role in the crime was equally crucial, was convicted of manslaughter and perverting the course of justice, receiving a 17-year prison sentence. Though the sentences were severe, they brought little comfort to Becky's family, who now had to live with the permanent absence of their daughter. The impact of the case extended beyond the borders of Bristol. It sparked national discussions about the need for greater vigilance in dysfunctional family dynamics and more effective interventions in situations where signs of disturbing behavior are ignored. Becky's tragedy also led to increased support for organizations dedicated to protecting children and young people, highlighting the importance of being alert to signs of abuse or predatory behavior. For Darren and Angie, life would never be the same. The house that was once a home full of life was now a place of painful memories and an unbearable void. The smiling face of Becky in the photos around the house was a constant reminder of what had been taken from them so brutally. The grief for them was endless, a wound that would never fully heal. Justice may have been served in the courtroom, but the loss of Becky left a deep scar on the souls of all who loved her. The case of Becky Watts remains one of the most tragic and disturbing in recent UK history. Her memory Now that you know the dark reality behind the case of Becky Watts, I ask you, what would you do if you discovered someone close to you was hiding disturbing secrets? Are we truly safe within our own social circles? It's time to reflect and take action. How can you protect those you love from dangers that might be closer than you imagine? If this story made you rethink your beliefs about safety and trust, be sure to subscribe to the Spooky Stories channel and activate notifications. That way, you can continue learning how to identify warning signs and perhaps prevent something like this from happening again. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect yourself and those you love today.